Hello and welcome to Creating Executive Excellence. How executive leaders frustrated with hitting business plateaus can increase productivity, optimize efficiency, and generate higher profits so that they can lead a culture of excellence. And in today's episode, we're going to be diving deep on how great leaders uncover their blind spots to unlock their performance. And we are going to be speaking with no other than Marisa Murray. Marisa Murray is the CEO of Leaderly International, a TEDx speaker, 3 times Amazon best-selling author of Work Smart, Iterate, and Blind Spots, and a contributing author to the USA Today bestseller, The Younger Self Letters. She's a certified executive coach specializing in leadership development and building high-performance teams. And her passion is supporting her executive clients in unlocking their untapped potential to yield superior business results with greater ease. Marisa, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Pleasure to have you.
So excited for this conversation. Marissa, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and how do you support executive leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a little bit about my background. I was loved sciences when I was growing up, engineer, decided to become an engineer, worked as an engineer for several years. So I was always kind of technical, very analytical. And then I decided to complement my engineering degree with an MBA. And after my MBA, I really wanted to join a company that had lots of change because I noticed when I was working before that, I'd get kind of bored fast with different projects. And so I joined consulting. I joined Anderson Consulting at the time, which became Accenture. And I was there for about 15 years, all the way from what they call an experienced analyst. And I made my way all the way up to partner. And that was an incredible journey because there was, it's on steroids for team effectiveness. You get on a project, you staff people, you have to figure out how to work together fast, you have to deliver results for clients, and then you have to dissolve the team and do it all over again and do that over and over and over again. And it's also a high pressure environment because in consulting, clients are paying a lot of money for your services, and you're kind of young and you're figuring out what you're doing, but you have to really deliver high value in a short period of time. And so I would say that whole period I worked really hard, and I put a lot of effort, and I did a lot of things well, but I pretty much exhausted myself as I kind of worked through this. And I decided at that point that I was frustrated and I was grumpy and I needed a change. And then I changed roles and I became vice president of a large telecom. And in that role, I was it's there's this expression that's wherever you go, there you are. I was the same, I made this total change, went to a completely different company, completely different dynamic. And yet myself, I was still feeling very, very frustrated. And I ended up leaving and being really confused. In fact, my husband dared me. This is the story in my first book, Work Smart. The opening story is about how I quit without a plan because he dared me to quit over champagne because we were celebrating a performance bonus and I was so grumpy. And he was like, if you're this grumpy, you should quit. And I was like, I can quit? I was just excited. I was just dumb. And then I was like, okay, because I'm going to quit right now. And he's like, fine. We were daring each other. And then I texted my boss and I said, I need to talk to you first thing tomorrow. It was a Sunday night. And my boss called my cell in the sushi restaurant we were in. And then I picked up the cell just automatically. And then he was like, what do you need to talk about? And then I was kind of I don't like my job. I want to quit. And then he said, which I will never forget, wow, I guess you've given this a lot of thought, which was very funny because I clearly had not. Anyway, more detail than you probably wanted. But what led me to the reflection at that point, I kind of had to face myself. I had to realize what is going on. Do I go and get another job and just kind of repeat this pattern, or so what's going on with me? And I started dabbling with a few different things and realizing I had to do work on myself. And then I started to get into curriculum around personal development and leadership development in general, and ultimately did my executive coaching certification, which kind of blew my mind in terms of all the things that I wasn't doing when I was actually a really big leader. Like I was a really senior leader, and no one had kind of taught me some of these things. I, like most leaders, I had learned by rote. Although I had gone to workshops and leadership development things, I hadn't integrated into my leadership style. And so that's 9 years ago now. I've been started Leaderly, been working directly with executives in their roles and corporate teams in a corporate environment, and trying to bring all these tool sets that exist in our human intelligence to the workplace, to corporate environments, and to people that are in these important leadership roles.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. And again, you mentioned, because I know you're an avid learner, and like you have so much extensive experience with not coaching executives, even before you realize that that's what you wanted to do. That, you know, so it's very interesting. And so, in terms of like building high performance teams, can you share some common blind spots that you've observed that among leaders, and how do they hinder executive excellence?
Absolutely. I mean, teaming is really important, and it's been kind of under attack during the COVID, and also the remote work. Like there's been really a lot of erosion in terms of team effectiveness. And I've been doing a lot of work in kind of recreating that cohesion with teams, regardless of their configuration, remote or local. There's still a lot of work that needs to happen to get to a high performance team. And there's nothing better in terms of boosting individual performance than having a team that has each other's back and is growth oriented for each of the individual leaders. And so I've been doing a lot of work in that area. But what I would say is, in terms of the foundations, it has to do with the trust among team members and the orientation around growth. And I do think that, like, as a leader in a corporation, or as someone who has ambition to rise up in terms of, their impact in the world or their level in a particular organization, we all have to kind of be in this funny land of being confident enough and courageous enough to be putting ourselves out there, and yet humble and open enough to be constantly looking for how we get 1% better. And that combination of those two energies, both in the leader and in how the leader can creates the environment for the team, and how they generate the culture of that in the team, is really, really critical to the team's success. And one of the pieces of that is one of the pieces of growth is helping people see each other's blind spots. I'm teaching my 16-year-old son right now. I have two sons, and my youngest son is 16. He is learning how to drive, and he is constantly changing lanes without looking at his blind spot, like that, like just like la 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 la, right? And so I'm living the reality of what it's like to not check your blind spots physically, and it's very scary. And I think as leaders, we're not checking our mirrors either often enough. And our mirrors are each other, because what I talk about in my book, blind spots, I define a blind spot as the difference between your intention and your impact. So the difference between your intention and impact. So we all go to work with like a really positive intention. We want to do a good job and we want to get great results. And then our desire for that intention makes us do certain things, lead a meeting a certain way, talk to somebody a certain way, get, frustrated a certain way, and that creates an impact. And the delta between that impact and that intention is where our blind spots live. And we only know our impact if we ask. We can't know our impact unless we ask, because the impact lives in the other people's heads. So common blind spots are things, just very simple things like that, where maybe a leader, one of the blind spots in the book that I like talking about is different views of success. So different views of success is where, I, as a leader, I'll just give you an example from me. I used to run these meetings with my team on Monday mornings that I thought were amazing. Okay. They were like efficient and fast, and we'd get through all the things we needed to get through, and everybody would know what they would focus on for the week. And I just felt like a rock star when I came out of them. Okay. And then through feedback, I found out that people weren't sleeping Sunday night because of how much they hated my meeting. They hated my meeting. Number one, they hated my meeting. And secondly, some people weren't sleeping. And third, they would complain after my meeting. So I would negatively impact their productivity. Like, so here I am thinking that I'm like launching everybody perfectly for their week. And then I would hear that they'd stick around and complain after the meeting. Okay. So I was like, what? Like, so my intention, right, was just give the clarity, set the course of action, you know, all this kind of stuff, and do it efficiently and don't waste people's time. And my impact was like so different. And that was a huge blind spot for me. So that's a blind spot that I would call differing views of success. So my view of success was all those things I just mentioned, but their view of success, when I started to ask, like, okay, well, what's a successful meeting for you? They're like, we never see each other. We need to connect. There's dependencies on each other that we need time to discuss. And you're publicly, not, they didn't say it this way, but kind of publicly humiliating us when something on our status chart is red, rather than getting us to help each other in terms of moving through these things. And I was like, wow. So my view of success for that meeting was very different from their view of success for their meeting. And they're right, because this meeting was for them. Right. So there's an example.
Wow, that's a powerful example. A little bit before we talked about, you know, effectiveness and your view on leadership being more effective. Can you expound a little bit more about that, and what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, a lot of times we measure our leadership, or we measure ourselves in terms of our productivity, which is very important. We measure ourselves in terms of our efficiency, our turnaround times, you know, our revenues and our profits. Like, so we're good at having, you know, all of these metrics. But then sometimes, you know, it's not the productivity that's a problem. Like, our people are really productive, but are they productive in the right things? Right? Are they actually focused on the right things? You know, you can be very productive and you can be very efficient and you can get really good metrics on something, but your customers might still not be buying, or they still might not be satisfied. And so we don't even know what is going to really move the needle on these things. And so that's where, as a leader, we can't just think about these metrics. Well, we have to think about them, but then we have to figure out, like, okay, what do we have to change? Where can we be more effective? And how can we actually pay much more attention to things that we might be blind to things that other people see that we don't see, to experiences that are not our intention, but that are obviously the experience of other people. So that's kind of leadership. Again, like I said, it's like this: you have to be confident, but you have to be humble all the time, and open to being wrong.
Open to being.
Yeah. So many of us are so addicted to being right, right? We're addicted to being right. We love being right. I loved being right. And now I realize that, you know, I can't love being right. You know, if I'm in I love being right, then I am basically at risk of making everyone else wrong.
It's like Right Addiction Anonymous.
Yeah.
So you talked about so you talked about impact.
Yes.
And impact comes from when you have to ask to know if there's an impact.
Yes.
And again, it just really delves into feedback.
Yes.
And so like the potential within executives it can never be unleashed until those factors are in place.
I mean, what I find with leadership is you keep, and similar to what you were talking about in terms of your summit, you keep kind of bumping into these barriers as you elevate to these different levels. And you know, we always had the analogy, you know, around the glass ceiling, right? Like, you're kind of like, why can't I get past this, right? And I have this image all the time with my clients where I just feel like they're breaking through layers and layers and layers and layers as they elevate. But those layers are, I believe, driven primarily by your blind spots. And so you might think you're doing, there's always insight in really small changes to sometimes the way you're doing things. But for you to have a hypothesis about that, first you have to understand from your people what the impact is. So I'll just give you another example of one of my favorite characters in the book is called David the Difference Maker, and all of the characters in my book are based on very real situations and clients. David the Difference Maker was an incredible leader, an incredible salesperson, very leading of the sales organization, and we called him David the Difference Maker because when I interviewed people about him, because that's what I do to get feedback from my clients, I go and I interview people all around them, and I ask them what are their strengths. And then I ask them how do they impact you and what could they do more differently to improve your collaboration? I ask all these questions and I find these themes. And when I interviewed people for David, I found out that he was like incredible leader, incredible track record, incredible, and made the difference on deals. For instance, they would say, if David is on this deal, that's why we win. And so that's great, right? And then in the feedback from his team, it was all about the space he was giving people, the lack of space that he was giving people. So he's the difference maker, and he kind of knows that he's the difference maker, and everybody else knows that he's the difference maker. But hidden behind that strength is a blind spot where it's like, well, if he's the difference maker, then what is everyone else doing? And he was getting really frustrated because he was starting to drop balls because he had so much scale and so much responsibility. The company had grown so big that he couldn't physically be the difference maker anymore in all these deals. And yet he didn't know that he had to elevate and create, like his job changed from when we got started working together to when we stopped working together. We worked together for about 8 months. His job changed from I am the difference maker to I am the creator of difference makers. And so then he started to coach people more and give them more space and let them lead the client interactions and be there in the background and do all these stuff. And as a result, he started to utilize his team, and his team was so much happier and their results were so much happier. And he was so much happier because he wasn't taking this all on himself. I mean, when I first worked with him, he was really unhappy. And he was like, he said, I secretly want to quit. Like, I'm not going to quit, but I secretly want to quit because everyone expects me to do everything. And then they yell at me when it doesn't work. And like, they're just lucky to have me. Like, he was in that headspace, right? And I was like, okay, let's look at this. Let's find a different way of being.
So we know. Oh, what were you going to say?
No. I was just saying that you really talk about. Could you elaborate on a method where, let's say, for example, David the Difference Maker, could you elaborate on a particularly impactful method or approach that you've used to help, let's say, David or other leaders identify and address their blind spots?
Yeah, absolutely. So the identifying blind spots is easier than everyone thinks, right? Everyone thinks like, oh, we can't see it. The thing is, everyone else can. Everyone else can see your blind spots. So yes, you cannot see them. You're blind to them, but they can see them. Now, the other problem is our intention is blind to other people. Like people can't see our intention. They just experience the impact. So we're kind of like, they're blind to your intention, and we're blind to our impact. Okay. So now I do these interviews and I kind of collect people and they call them impact statements, because feedback, I try to make it a little bit like, it's not like we're not telling you who you should be, but we're telling you your impact on me. And you can't really argue about that, right? Like we can't argue who's right or wrong. It's just fact. It's just data. And I like data. I'm, an analytical person. So I try to get people to sort of distance themselves and say, let's just collect these little data points. And then let's look at what we're motivated to shift based on those data points. And so when we get the data points, a lot of times what we end up seeing, like what my clients go through is, in fact, they will read, we'll read through the impact statements and they'll start to want to argue. Well, that's not what it was. And that's not, and the reason why they're arguing is because it wasn't their intention. Right? So we're defensive because we had a positive intention, just like my meeting that I gave you that example of. I had a positive intention. So then if you start telling me like my meetings are bad, like I'm just like, my meetings are great. Like that's not even how it goes down. Right? Like I can't help but get defensive because I'm defending my intention. But my intention is completely blind to these people. They don't know my intention. For all they know, I just like being a tyrant. You know, that's all they can see. Like they don't know. Like I get a kick out of barking orders at people. I mean, they don't know my intention. And so there's two things that I think are really important is that number one is we de-dramatize feedback because we have to understand that they're blind to our intention and we are blind to the impact. And then as leaders, one tactic and tool that I think is really helpful is for them to just immediately begin to share their intention much more overtly. So like to say, my intention in this meeting is for us to, if I had said this, right? Okay, guys, my intention in this meeting is for us to, as quickly as possible, go through the status, make sure we all know what we're focused on. And then they might say, okay, that's great, but can we, and then I ask, what's your intention, right? And we co-create an intention. What's your intention with this meeting? Oh, and then we'd like to discuss some dependencies. And I'll be like, okay, I'll save time for that, right? So if I share my intention, other people share their intention, all of a sudden we have a much better chance of aligning. And in this book, I have this attentions this way and impacts this way of aligning the intention and the impact. So we're all putting all that force in the same direction.
You know, one word that I've had resistance against in the workplace is perspective. Everybody, it's all about perception. It's all about, I had so much resistance because I'm like, oh, but what you just said just beautifully demonstrated on how we can level out, like how you talked about the intention and the impact. Like the intention is what we're bringing, and then the impact is how it's affecting the workplace. So
absolutely, I hated that word too because people would tell me like it's a perception and perception is reality, and I'm like, it's not reality. Like that's not reality, right? So I deliberately avoid that word because I feel like that word feels subjective. It feels like it's debatable. And the reality, and then people say perception is reality, and you're like, no, perception isn't actually reality, right? So that's why I just don't even go there. I'm like, it's much easier for me to think about. I always think about it this way. Words come out of my mouth and feelings and emotions exude out of my body. And those things get picked up by another person's body and get filtered through that other person's brain. And they get transformed. Anybody who's played the little game like telephone tag where we whisper in a circle and then at the end it's like hysterical how different it is. Everyone understands that when something goes through another the body, it gets transformed. And it's normal and it's okay. It's like we can't expect anything else, right? It's normal. If you put any object through another object, it's going to transform. And so the first thing is just understanding that that's normal. And then the second thing is getting really curious and then actually finding it a little bit light, like, wow, like that's fascinating. Like I always tell people, try not to be angry, try to be fascinated. Like just try to be fascinated. Like, isn't it fascinating that my positive intention, got translated into that impact? It's fascinating. And now it's like, okay, now that I know that, how can I make, and it's usually very small changes. It's usually things like sharing your intention. It's usually things like co-creating a little bit more, aligning just a little bit more. It's very, very small things, and it transforms the impact on the other person.
That is so.
Marisa said, we get to be mad scientists without saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you give your examples, I can actually visually see like a lot of the chaos that has happened, from the workspace. So the way you paint pictures with your words is fascinating.
Yeah, well, we all have a lot of really frustrating and unempowering moments in teamwork, because teamwork is not easy. And so a lot of times we might blame a culture, we might blame an environment. What was nice about my career is I as a consultant, I worked in so many different corporate environments just in project-based. And you do enough of that and you realize like there's humans everywhere, and human collaboration is both extraordinary and also challenging, challenging. And so how do you just, whenever you're trying to do hard things, you need diverse talent and you need diverse ideas. And as soon as you have that diversity, then you need to have a lot of humility to figure out how do we optimize this collaboration so that we all can bring our best.
Mm. Yes, yes,
We know
definitely.
that you have a free gift for the audience. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. As we discussed, I'm really passionate about people getting the feedback so that they can sit there and they can get hypotheses around what their impact is. And my typical clients, I do these interviews and we get really rich data, and I recognize that's not accessible to a lot of people and not accessible to everybody. And so I did build a little app called Feedback Friend. It's a website, feedbackfriend.ai, everyone can go to. And in there, you can, if you're brave and courageous enough, you can put in the email addresses of 4 to 12 people. And then they will get a little bit of a survey that goes to them. And using AI, it'll create a confidential summary for you. So nobody has to be worried about you, how they say things or whatever, because it gets filtered through, and AI will kind of create a summary, and it'll create a summary of your top strengths and a summary of areas to reflect on, impacts that they may want to reflect on. And so I encourage everybody to just give it a try. I know it's a little scary, but ask. I learned so much every time. When I was testing it with like my friends and my children and my family and my colleagues and all these and I learned so much every time I did it. It was fantastic. So there's always really great reflections, and I think that if we can practice that openness, just practice that openness and practice that curiosity and fascination, I think that your blind spot is the leads to your next breakthrough.
Mm. Yes, and Marissa, how else can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is leaderly.com, and it's Ley. I think you can see it actually. So it's leaderly, Ley.com. So there's information there in terms of the work that we do. And I am on all the social platforms, but I hang out mostly on LinkedIn. So feel free to message me on LinkedIn. It's just Marissa Murray.
Yeah.
Yes, and just a last closing words for the audience, just from the heart, like what is something that you would like to say to these executives right now?
That being able to lead teams and collaborate with teams, and human collaboration, I think, is sort of our highest calling. The journey to your best leader is the journey to your best person, your best family, your best spouse, your best life. So investing in your leadership, reflecting on your leadership, refining your leadership, I think is the most important thing. My company's called Leaderly because I believe that's the highest compliment. So if I get called Leaderly one day, I feel very, very special, because I think that taking the time to really impact your leadership pivots the transformation and impact you can have in the world.
That is so powerful. So, if you are courageous and you really want to have a breakthrough on your blind spots, definitely go ahead and click on the link to Marissa's free gift. It's going to be in the description of this video or in this email. And make sure you definitely go ahead and get feedback. Get feedback from people that you may not have the right relationship with right now, but just be open to hear what they say, so you have the opportunity and you have a tool that you can go back and work on that relationship. So be courageous, be brave, and go ahead right now. I'll get access to Marisa's free gift where you can get feedback on your blind spots. And again, it is going to be in the email, or it is going to be in the description wherever you're watching this video. So take the quiz, get feedback, let people who know you, love you, may not like you that much right now, let them give you feedback so you can learn the skills and learn a way to improve your leadership, so you can be a better leader, not only for yourself, but for your organization, and even just the people who get to do life with you. It definitely can have a great impact, right? And you can be more in line with your intention. So go ahead and get access to Marissa's free gift. It's going to be in the description or in this email, so you can get feedback from those people around you. And thank you so much. Marissa, this was very powerful. And also, we want to know for all the listeners right now, what was your biggest takeaway from this interview? Reply to this email, go ahead and, leave some comments in the description, in the comment section below, and let Marisa know, like, what was the highlight. If you have any questions for her, go ahead and reach out to her on LinkedIn, go to her website and connect with her. And, definitely reach out to her if you know that she is the executive coach to come in and work with you in your organization. We will see you on the next episode of Creating Executive Excellence. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.